Hello, my name is Leslie Gonzalez Barragan. I have been a YTM youth, a YTM counselor, and YTM's Latino Outreach Coordinator. I have completed my bachelor's degree in political science and theology. I'm hoping to be able to share with you my humble insights on how to create a youth in theology and ministry program that is authentically intercultural. To begin to share this vision, I would like to explore what the Youth in Theology and Ministry program is and what an authentically intercultural community is on their own. I will be speaking on behalf of my knowledge and my perspective. By no means is my vision or perspective the only one to be shared or the most knowledgeable, but rather one of many possible beginnings. I do not have all the insights nor all the answers, but I'm open to being vulnerable enough to share my thoughts with you. I will be sharing some reasons why working towards an intercultural community at YTM is important to provide meaning for this vision. To begin, what does the Youth in Theology and Ministry program look like as it stands today? As an alum, as a counselor, and as a staff member, I'm able to say that YTM is a beloved community. I wrote it in my surveys as a youth, and I read it in the evaluations I received as a counselor. Why did I feel this way? Why do we all feel this way at YTM? For me as a youth, ultimately, it was because I was given new tools to talk to God. Everyone else around me was given tools as well. I truly believe that the closer we are to God, the closer we feel to each other. YTM is 2 weeks of feeling connected to our spirituality because YTM was designed in a way in which God is at the center, since morning prayer, to service, to theology courses, to evening prayer, and a final reflection time at cabin time. I was also given an opportunity to be heard. YTM creates more than enough space to listen to each other's encounters with Christ and to hold them as valid. Something hard to come across for youth who are often taught but not learned from. I could spend hours talking about what YTM is about, but I could never fully describe it. Beloved community is the best as it can be described, at least when talking about YTM subjectively. Objectively, YTM is a 2-year, 2-week summer camp. It is held on a beautiful university campus. The cost to attend YTM is an average cost as can be compared with other Bible and church-related camps, especially one taking into account the benefits that youth receive. For me, it was the first college campus I spent the night in. It was an opportunity to form connections with college professors that could open the doors to my future education. YTM was designed and modified in a way that was inspired by the experiences and practices of its directors and board, as well as the insights provided by the youth that attended. A very Anglo experience of faith, inspired by the Benedictines on campus, as well as by the various orders of vocation partners. We must also not forget the actors that play a huge role in creating the YTM experience for youth, the counselors. College students, most of which are undergraduates from the College of St. Benedict and St. John's University, most of which share their own faith experiences and practices with the youth, all diverse in their own way. Counselors hold a very special place in my heart, and I view them as extremely significant to the YTM experience. I still remember all my own counselors, even those who were not my favorite or the most close to me. I also know what it feels like to be a counselor and what it feels like to be a part of a team, but also what it feels like when I'm working alone as a counselor. Oftentimes, the way counselors treat each other is how youth treat each other. Again, I could go on and on describing what YTM is like and still never succeed because every staff member, every counselor, and every youth plays a role in what the YTM community is all about. To move on, what is an authentic intercultural community look like? The best definition that I could find is one that is described as communities in which there is a deep understanding and respect for all cultures. Intercultural communication focuses on the mutual exchange of ideas and cultural norms, and the development of deep relationships. In an intercultural society, no one is left behind or unchanged because everyone learns from one another and grows together. The best example I can give of an authentic intercultural community is a family. This is perhaps not the first thing that comes to one's mind, but I think of all individuals having their own culture because for me, culture is the behavior and patterns of an individual. A family is intercultural in the sense that it is a group of people that understands each other's uniqueness and each other's cultures, yet lives and grows together as one. However, an intercultural community beyond a family setting becomes more complex as more individuals are introduced. Intercultural communities, I believe, are hard to come across. In the United States, we can agree that we are multicultural. There are many groups of cultures living side by side here, many religions, languages, ethnicities, with a certain level of tolerance for one another. We are sometimes cross-cultural. That means that some cultures build bridges with each other and interact, either by combining more than one cuisine at a restaurant, an interracial marriage, or learning how to be bilingual. There's a sharing amongst cultures there. But an intercultural society or community would require change. All members of society don't just tolerate one another or interact with each other, but adapt to each other and become one community. There is equality in this society. There is just one tribe. So how do we take the YTM community as it is and adapt it to be an intercultural community in which an individual's culture can be celebrated and become one with the beloved community that YTM already is? First, I'd like to give a reason as to why this is even worth discussing. What is the importance of having an intercultural YTM community? I'll provide just 3 of many reasons why. The first and most simple. This conversation aligns very well with one of YTM's goals, to reflect American Catholicism. Second, the faces of YTM are changing. And third, accepting multiculturalism is essential for an understanding of Christ. To elaborate more on my first reason, the YTM curriculum includes goals. One of these goals states, to recruit a population of youth that mirrors the diversity of American Catholicism. So what does that mean? That means that the demographics of YTM strives to match the demographics of the United States Catholic Church. So what are those? According to the Faith Matters survey, Hispanic youth make up 60% of all Catholic youth in our church. So taking this database into account, Hispanics make up over 50% of young Catholic adults, while other races besides white make up between 10 to 15% or less depending on the area. Those are the demographics that would meet YTM's goal. Our most recent YTM statistics have shown that YTM youth have comprised between 40 to 50% of underrepresented youth, most of which have been Latino. These numbers are close to being reflective of American Catholicism, so we are meeting our goal. But only an intercultural community will allow for YTM to keep those numbers where they are. Secondly, I believe that an intercultural community has become of more urgent importance for YTM in recent years, because the diversity of YTM youth is expanding. The faith practices and cultures that youth are starting to bring to YTM can be worldly different amongst youth. We are now seeing in the same classroom white youth coming from YTM from Fargo, North Dakota, in the same room as a Samoan youth from Anchorage, Alaska, and a Latino youth from Long Prairie, Minnesota. As I mentioned earlier, I'm grateful for the way in which YTM is designed to listen to youth, but it is also important for YTM to be able to understand what the youth are saying and where their insights are coming from, to be able to continue to empower youth as YTM has always done. Lastly, taking in multiculturalism and working to develop it into an intercultural community is essential for an expanded understanding of God. It is no lie that we are made in the image and likeness of God. We hear it over and over again, and we use it to make ourselves feel beautiful and to give us a sense of power as a human race over other creations. But do we really understand the depth of that fact? All persons, all shapes and sizes, all languages and colors are created in the image and likeness of God. So how great and unimaginable is God truly, if we are all so different, yet we are all made from the same image? As a theologian whose job is to search for understanding, I think it is essential to get to know more about people and individuals' cultures, as well as their faith practices, in my search for understanding who our Creator is. For me, it is important to establish reasons as to why I envision an intercultural community at the Youth in Theology and Ministry program, for us to be more motivated to listen to this vision and more motivated to commit to it. So now, with all this being said, I would like to share my vision. I'd like to start out by saying that I have yet to hear about an intercultural community at any faith program. There's multicultural, there's cross-cultural, but intercultural is a lot to ask from for a community to build, especially within a camp that lasts 14 days. However, that is not to say that I do not believe in the miraculous works of God. I have seen Him perform many miracles at YTM, and this can still be one of them. So how does this vision start? I like to offer 4 suggestions for a start to an intercultural community. Just the beginning. These suggestions include cost of attendance for YTM, expanding recruitment strategies, promoting intercultural competency among senior staff and counselors, and finally, changing what is asked of youth. First things first. Let's make YTM accessible to the youth that it wants to recruit. A diversity of youth means a diversity of recruitment styles necessary and a diversity of needs that need to be met. As I mentioned earlier, when describing YTM as it was objectively, I spoke about the price. Compared to other camps, the price is reasonable or average. Currently, the cost for YTM is $800. This cost, for the majority of white youth and their families, is a reasonable or manageable price tag. Or for underrepresented youth, this is not accessible. Why is that? This might be hard to understand or to believe, but let's take into account spending habits of these different groups. If we look at a diocese, for example, we'll use the Archdiocese of St. Paul and Minneapolis as an example, because they provide detailed information on their budget and spending. As an archdiocese, St. Paul and Minneapolis spends more than $4 million on Catholic education. This means supporting Catholic schools and students, in which the majority of students are white. They spend about $100,000 on marriage and family life, which includes youth ministry and youth-related programming, accessible to all youth, of course, but of which mostly is distributed to white youth. Those are just 2 departments that clearly state are in support of youth and youth-related activities, not counting all other departments that take care of other ministry services. Whereas the Latino Ministry Department of the diocese states to have $500,000 as a budget, which covers all ministries for more than 20 parishes, including its youth and youth-related activities. What am I trying to say with this information? Overall, as a diocese, as a church, Latino parishes find themselves spending less for their ministries and programs. This includes Latino youth as compared to their white parishioners' spending patterns. So as an $800 program, this would hit differently for each different community member, depending on what parish they're coming from. I could go further and talk about average household income of youth from different ethnicities, but I don't think that is necessary to go into. In comparison, underrepresented youth find themselves with a lower income, for which $800 is a substantial amount. My solution for this change is to find a way to make YTM accessible to underrepresented youth, starting with the cost, before underrepresented youth are even invited to attend. It is essential for YTM to be able to have a secure amount of funding available to underrepresented youth, either through specific scholarships or donations. I consider this fair, looking at the differences of income and parochial support that majority of students could be accustomed or have more accessibility to in comparison to their underrepresented peers. This does not mean a free ride to YTM. As someone who has received many scholarships in their lifetime, I know that scholarships do not mean no work. There are ways to compromise this. Perhaps that means asking for thank you notes from youth, or providing tools for fundraisers. But accessibility to camp is the start to a more intercultural community. Once these doors are open, recruitment becomes more easy. But recruitment is another process in and of itself. The position of Latino Outreach Coordinator served the YTM community well, as was reflected in the demographics. Having someone that is in charge of finding ways to establish connections and maintains communication with underrepresented communities in a way that they understand and are most comfortably communicating is essential. But these connections and communications can be made even stronger. As of now, outreach is planned to be made by an undergraduate student assistant. This works, but connections with Latino communities and families may be lost once this assistant leaves. YTM has shown to be best promoted through word of mouth and continually reaching out to communities that already know of YTM. I believe it is essential for a senior staff to be present at the initial connection being made with underrepresented parishes. Why do I say this? Because oftentimes Latino communities don't have youth ministers to reach out to on behalf of youth. It's mostly priests or youth speaking for themselves with a small amount of parental communication or awareness. By having senior staff present at initial connections with parishes during outreach, connections are made much stronger, even with the turnaround of Latino coordinators, until more stable and permanent outreach is established. That way, communities have a more permanent person to look at and to build trust with. That is the language that underrepresented communities speak and connect with, which is different from what YTM is used to up until now. Now, on the topic of staff, promoting multicultural competency among staff is the next suggestion I'd like to expand on. What exactly is multicultural competency? The best definition I found for that is awareness, knowledge, and skills needed to work with others who are culturally different from self in meaningful, relevant, and productive ways. To become interculturally competent is something that should be added into counselor and senior staff training as an essential tool for knowing how to best serve YTM youth and how to work together and communicate among staff as that becomes more diverse as well. As stated within the definition, training for multicultural competency would need to work towards having staff develop awareness of self. That means being aware of individual biases, prejudices, and backgrounds. Knowledge of other groups and the privilege that we hold in comparison to other culture groups or identities, as well as skills. Skills meaning the ability to interact with others with the awareness and knowledge that we have already acquired about our own selves and where we stand as a society. I cannot stress enough how important multicultural competency is. Think of it as a new language. You simply cannot fully communicate without this language if you want YTM to be an intercultural community. Senior staff should not exempt themselves from this language. YTM theology professors should be aware of this language as well. YTM counselors should start learning this language and be aware that they are expected to develop this skill since the first days of training. The faces of YTM staff are also changing. They are becoming more diverse. But just as it is important to develop multicultural competency for the sake of YTM youth, it is important to develop it for the sake and the support of staff members that may be from underrepresented communities themselves. In jobs all across the board, it is the underrepresented staff that are doing the work of speaking this language. But underrepresented staff need just as much training in multicultural competency as other staff members. This would place all counselors at the same level of knowledge and consequently at the same level of responsibility for promoting an intercultural community at YTM, not just the multicultural staff members. Last suggestion that I will be discussing is in relation with the youth. I often reflect on my own experience at YTM and how it is that I was able to feel accepted as an underrepresented youth. I have finally been able to pinpoint what it was, and that is that I was never singled out. Did I ever feel uncomfortable being one of 5 to 7 students of color? Yes, but no one pointed it out and made me feel different for it. Was I ever confused as a youth because it was my first experience of faith in which everything was in the English language? Yes, but no one forced me to speak English as I prayed, but rather accepted me if I ever prayed in Spanish. Did other YTM youth know what it was like to be a Latina Catholic in the U.S.? No, but it was never asked of me to teach others about it. These are just a couple of examples to say that I was never expected to teach anyone about myself or my culture. Therefore, I never felt singled out, and I am forever grateful for that. That is what I hope youth get to experience, pure acceptance. All YTM youth, no matter their culture, sign up for YTM for the same reason, to learn more about their faith and to have an encounter with Christ. It is not their job to teach their peers or their counselors about their culture unless they desire to do so themselves. Therefore, we should not prompt them to do it. It is also unnecessary to do things that prompt cultural conversation that does not come naturally. I have found through my experience at a variety of settings that sometimes environments that are working towards a more intercultural atmosphere take steps to allow underrepresented members feel more welcome that are overtly excessive, which unfortunately makes the genuineness behind these efforts get lost. If not overly excessive, these steps are taken without any commitment or accountability to follow them, and that defeats the welcoming feelings and instead draws out more distinctions amongst groups. What I'm trying to say is, sometimes less is more. Underrepresented youth that are less questioned about their differences from the majority feel more welcomed. That does not mean to go about without acknowledging youth's culture. It means not having to change YTM's existing culture or swapping out traditions for others, but rather adding on to them. As an intercultural community is defined, changing and adapting to become one. YTM's culture is good just as it is, and I fell in love with it just as it was. Things should not be taken away, but rather added on in the simplest and subtlest of ways. Knowing the difference between what is simple and what is excessive is a hard thing to figure out, but I know that through conversation and constructive criticism, this can be done. This connects back to my third reason provided. Multiculturalism is essential for understanding Christ, but underrepresented youth have just as much to share as their white peers do. They both have cultures that the other is not aware of. How can we subtly instigate them to share with each other equally by not having one group or the other feel singled out or guilty? I think the best way to do this is by having all youth share. Why not have, for example, all summer ones on day 2 of YTM share their faith experience as part of morning session as a form of introduction to who they are, an introduction to the community. In this way, all youth start sharing their individual culture so that over the course of the 14 days, all youth are aware of each other's uniqueness, and as bonds form, they become more intercultural. This is just one idea of what can be done, a very minor example and suggestion. There is so much more that I can say and more explanation for the short list of suggestions that I've made, but like I said at the start, this is just the beginning. This video is more of an introduction to the conversation of making YTM more intercultural. I expect more ideas and questions to be inspired from what I have said today. But I must say this. This vision and these suggestions are nothing without a sense of true commitment and accountability from members of the YTM community. Just as every staff member, every counselor, and every youth plays a role in what the YTM community is all about, every staff member, every counselor, and every youth must commit and be held accountable to the building of an intercultural community at YTM. This is a very difficult thing to ask of from any community, but I know that with the grace of God, we can carry out this vision together. Thank you so much.